Hey guys, what's up? My name is Jason.
I'm Delynn, and we are with the F.A.M. Project. So today we have a great conversation lined up with Brock Bevell. He's an awesome dude that we had the privilege of meeting, and he's going to cover some kind of taboo subjects today. Our hope at the F.A.M. Project is to be able to bring some of these conversations right to the dinner table, to be able to discuss them, things like addictions, being on your cell phone too much, or what we as parents can do to watch for signs of an addiction that may be in our own home.
So true. He talks about parents being the first line of defense, and he also talks about cool things like replacement therapy. You're going to learn all of that stuff today. So watch this conversation, get involved, leave a comment below if you have something to say, to add, or a question you might have. And we just know that you're going to enjoy this conversation today.
We are so grateful to have Brock Bevell with us. So Brock was actually born in Scottsdale, native here to Arizona. He's a fantastic sports fan, especially with football. And one of the things is his brother is actually an NFL coach. He's a father of 5 children, ages 16 to 24. He actually has 1 grandson. He's a retired Mesa police officer. Pivotal time in his life was the day he was run over as a police officer, which we'll talk a little bit about that today. He's owned his own private investigation business, worked in adult probation. He was a Navajo County medical legal death investigator. He was an assistant principal at a junior high here in Arizona, but he spent the last 5 years running a drug and alcohol addiction recovery center focusing around recreational therapy, which again, we'll learn a little bit about today. He's also the host of The Fix, which is his own channel. I encourage you to take a look at it on the YouTube if you just look at The Fix with Brock Bevell. Wow, Brock, we're excited to have you. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, man. That sounds good. I like that intro.
I wanted to turn the time over to you just to tell us a little bit more about maybe your background on things that you'd want to share that made you decide to get involved with helping people with addiction recovery.
Looking back at my life, I had the most amazing childhood. 2-parent home, 8 brothers and sisters, got married. I just had a beautiful life. That kind of took a turn early on in my career. I got into a foot pursuit in downtown Mesa, blew my knee out. And that was kind of my first experience with the opiates. I noticed that I really liked them, really killed the pain. So I recovered from it, went back to work. And then a few years later, I took a car to the leg on an accident, an incident that happened right there on Broadway and Gilbert Road. Long story short, I was run over. Severe injury to my knee, broke my ankle, and started taking opiates at that time. But what was interesting was my story kind of takes a turn there. I actually was retired from the injury, and that loss of my career as a police officer, that loss of that relentless chase for that dopamine, when you're retired, I didn't have that anymore. And I noticed that I could supplement that high, that adrenaline rush with the opiates. You know, I lost my career, I lost that brotherhood. I was so lonely, and I could feel myself getting just bombarded and held down by these opiates. So long story short, caused a divorce, moved up to Show Low. I was very lucky, got on with the school at the Show Low Junior High School, ran into a young man or a man who was the principal named Kevin Borton. Had a lot of information about addiction recovery. His daughter was actually running a program in Prescott. So he's like, you're in the wrong business, man. You should be running a recovery program. Because of my history, my sobriety time, it just made sense to me. And I wanted to bring all those career paths that I've had into one and to start a recovery program. So that's what we did. We started Blue Vase 5 years ago.
I know with Blue Vase, it's not your ordinary and typical recovery program, at least kind of what I've seen you've been doing. you want to just maybe say a little bit about kind of what makes you guys different or what you really like about your guys' program?
Yeah, I mean, there are thousands of different treatment centers out there. I'm sure they're all wonderful. I'm biased towards ours just because we see the work that these men have to put in. There has to be some type of buy-in. Does that make sense? To recover? Because I have to be vested. I have to have a personal interest in my own sobriety, right? And what we do here, we work on 3 areas: mind, body, and spirit. So a lot of what we do is we take our guys out in a recreational format, which is called recreational therapy. Number 1, get back in touch with nature and to get our minds tired so we can start molding ourselves and start just work from the bottom up. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. What's that cycle that you find people follow that gets them addicted to unhealthy behaviors or substances in the first place?
There's a couple things that I've seen, and we use this scenario. We have this little pebble, this little rock in our shoe. If you don't take your shoe off and get it out, it just creates this massive burr in your foot, and then it creates a blister, and it gets bigger, and it smothers. We call it stinking thinking. What that means is everybody around us is wrong. We think we know everything. We become depressed. We become just agitated, and that's kind of what fuels our addiction, that keeps us in the addiction.
I mean, are there certain things that you can pinpoint, behaviors that you can start noticing with people that we might be able to recognize that we can be preventative to say, if we can notice these things with our kids or these things with our friends, that maybe we can make a difference if we start noticing these signs or things that are happening?
Yeah, that's a really good point. Parents are your first line of defense. They have to be proactive in their kid's life. If I could recommend something for parents, I'd be, okay, number 1, be attentive in your kid's life. Know what they're doing, know who they're hanging out with, know where they're going, be rigorously involved in your child's life with their cell phones. That's where a lot of the addictions start and can continue, or with those devices. Another thing is that you got to talk to your kids. You got to talk to them, find out what's going on. We have juvenile kids. I have them too. They're like this. Every day you come home, you're like, oh my goodness, you don't know where you're going to get them at in the scale. But you do see trends. You see long-term depression. You see long-term of them wanting to be alone, isolation. And those are the big concerns that I see. Number 1, they don't want to be a part of the family anymore. They don't want to be like engaged at the dinners. They don't want to go to church anymore. There's something going on in their lives where there's that loss of spirit, that something's taking them away from that connection with dad and mom. So that's number 1. Then that isolation comes in where they're never off their cell phone. They're continuously engaged. Just that dopamine dump they're getting it from the cell phone. Because if they're getting it there, they're going to start chasing other areas. An immediate change in friends. But if you all of a sudden see them hanging out with different people, that's a red flag that you have to look at.
A lot of times too, you'll get parents that read information that talk about, don't be a helicopter parent, make sure your kids have autonomy. That's a fine line. That's a hard balance, because you want your kids to feel like they have autonomy. You don't want to be a helicopter parent necessarily, but what advice could you give to parents if they're thinking, I need to be involved? Like, how do we draw that line and kind of know how to navigate those waters? Because those are sensitive waters to navigate.
Yeah. My thing is, you have to know your kids. You have to absolutely be involved in your kids' lives. You should be on their social media with them. You should be on Instagram with them. If they're like, hey, Mom, I'm not going to put you on Snapchat. Well, why? I talk to my kids on Snapchat all the time.
Yeah.
And so my recommendation is really be involved.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It seems like so much of the underlying piece here is you got to be involved with your kid's life, not controlling, just being involved in a part of their life on their level.
That takes the effort from the parent. You know what I'm saying? As a parent, I feel like, oh, that's my child. They should come to me and ask me questions and sit down with me because I'm going to give them that advice. No, it's your job. I know that's hard sometimes, but you have to engage. So when that situation comes up, they're willing to talk to you. And some kids, I get it, they're hard to talk to, but you as a parent, you got to know your people. You got to be a good coach. That's what we say. You got to be a good coach and how to talk to them.
What is it that is happening you've touched on it a little bit, but let's talk a little bit more about it. What is it about these digital devices that is creating such an aggravation of addiction within our society today?
Experts have shared this, but there's a same chemical hook that you get from using heroin and your cell phone. It's that dopamine dump. And for example, when you take your kid's phone away from them, they're detoxing. They're having to go through a detox from their cell phone because you're having this dopamine dump, and they don't get that, so they're withdrawing from their cell phone. I mean, it's proven. It's absolutely crazy that it has a similar reaction to the brain. And now you're talking to a young kid who doesn't understand that phenomenon, and it's hard to explain.
I mean, obviously, cell phones, they're not going away. Could you give any advice on how parents can better manage that within their homes so that they're not being controlled by it, but at the same time where it's not completely taken out of their homes? Because we got to learn how to use this and not just, we can't use it at all. It's there whether we like it or not.
Well, it's moderation. It's moderation in all things. Does that make sense? And so moderation, as a parent, you should be able to put time restraints on when they use their cell phone, and where, because cell phones, we all understand, are a huge blessing in our lives. Remember when we were little kids, the only way you could find somebody is where the bike was parked out front. Now you can text anybody and you can get a hold of them as fast. It's a phenomenon. I love it. I think cell phones are amazing as well. But there has to be some type of moderation in all things, where you have to be able to talk to your kids and say, listen, before you go to school, there's no reason to have a cell phone. You're going to school connecting with all your friends. Leave your cell phone at home. When you get home from school, if you need it, you need to talk to people. You need it to call dad, mom. I mean, but we're seeing is this influx of these kids can't even have a conversation with you because they're looking at their phone. Oh, yeah, dad. And they're looking, and there's no eye contact, there's no communication. That's a problem.
I feel as parents, we are aware of these problems, and we're becoming even more hyper aware of these problems. But what do you think, in your opinion, how do we help the kids understand that? How do we help the kids understand why it is this way, why we're so concerned, why there has to be so much moderation? How do we help the kids buy into that?
That's where it comes down to, you got to be honest with them. You got to talk to them about it.
We've been talking with a researcher. So he's a doctor of family and marital development relationship development.
Okay.
And he was talking about how, because we asked the question, at what point do we start talking to our kids about digital devices? Because they can be extremely uncomfortable conversations. And I loved his answer. He said, there's not just one age to do that at. He said, here's what I can tell you. If you've reached a point to where you feel comfortable with the conversation, you're probably too late.
Too late.
Yeah. Meaning like you need to be having the conversation where you're uncomfortable, and it's hard. But if you say, well, now I'm comfortable having the conversation with my child because I think they're old enough, then you've probably already missed the timing that you should have talked to them about it.
You're dead. Yeah. So, I mean, here's the greatest scientific evaluation you can do. Go invite your parents to take the kid's cell phone away and see what happens. It's going to cause chaos in your home. And so it's easier to say, here, take your advice, self-medicate, because that's all we're doing really with our cell phones. And it's the same thing we're doing with alcohol and drugs, is we're self-medicating because we're bored or we're lonely or we're sad, right? And so we give them a cell phone, just like giving them alcohol, which is a depressant, and you read through all these social media and you're like, oh, I'm not good enough. So you can see how the brain works.
Well, even like you think about it too, there's age restrictions on alcohol, there's age restrictions on tobacco, there's age restrictions on gambling. There's no age restrictions on phone. And if we're saying we're literally creating that same chemistry in their brain that leads to addiction. And again, I just want to say, I'm not saying this saying, hey, we need to get rid of cell phones, but obviously as you're saying, there has to just be some control set in place, some monitoring that's done, conversations at a very early age that have to take place. So yeah, love with what you're saying is realizing that so much of addiction today can be coming from the misuse or miscommunication or no communication around the digital devices in people's homes.
It's a replacement theory. You have to replace as a family. I know it sounds crazy, but you got to replace those need for a cell phone for a need of involvement.
Yeah.
So what we do is when we take our families out and we are out there, that was a replacement for our cell phone use. They didn't need it because they were doing something bigger and better than sitting there playing games on their cell phone.
I love when I go out into nature, I'm not on my phone. I don't even think about it a lot, because it's just, there's something about being out there, being engaged that you just, and in fact, you appreciate it at times. You're thinking, gosh, I'm so glad I don't have to be looking at my cell phone all the time.
But even further than that, when you play baseball with your kid, you're not on your cell phone. Take my kids snorkeling. I'm not on my cell phone. I'm making that connection. They don't feel a need to be on the cell phone either if you're giving them something to do, a replacement for the cell phone.
So, Brock, let me ask, so any final words or thoughts that you'd like to share that could help us all better prepare ourselves or educate ourselves for the future, to improve, how we move forward in society to help end the addiction cycle? I mean, any kind of last thought to say, guys, we need to do this if we're going to move forward in the future to help with addiction?
Well, we need to start is in the homes. We need to start at the younger age, talking to our children, talking to people, being involved in our kids' life. We got to reconnect into the home. That's the biggest thing for me, is we got to create something where families want to be together. Families want to stay together. They want to work together. They want to build together. Right now, I feel like our families are kind of broken. Where parents are working so hard to provide for our kids that we lose track of those daily process that we need to do.
Brock, you've said so many amazing things that I'm sure are going to resonate with so many people. And obviously just the conversation and dialogue, I'm thinking of things, even me as a parent, like, I need to do better at this. I need to do this. If someone wants to get in contact with you, visit with you, learn more about what you do, how would our listeners or our readers, how would they get in contact with you to get more information about your programs and what you do?
They can send us an email. It's bvrcbrock@gmail.com. They can contact us. They can find us on Facebook. They can just put my name in there, Brock Bevell. That's the big step, is they got to reach out to us. They got to come find us.
Well, Brock, we can't thank you enough for visiting with us today, sharing your knowledge. I mean, even the way that you talk about this, you can tell you're an extremely passionate individual. You care about it. And just the information that you've shared, I'm sure is going to help all the different people that are either listening or reading this information. So thank you so much for your time today and for sharing these thoughts with us. So we appreciate
it. It was a good conversation. Thank you.
Hey, thanks for watching and sticking around. What a great conversation between Chris and Brock. Very, very cool stuff.
If there is anything that you want us to join in on a conversation about, or you'd like to see us do a video about, please put that in the comments below. We would love to be able to tackle all things for the fam with you guys.
Hey, hit the subscribe button, comment below, do all that stuff to be a part of the FAM project and what we have going on here on our YouTube channel and across all of our other social platforms. And we will see you again real soon.